The gap between wage growth and rising housing costs in the UK has widened significantly, particularly since the 2008 recession. While wages have increased at a slow pace, rent and property prices have skyrocketed, creating an affordability crisis. According to Zoopla, a first-time buyer would need an average income of £60,000 to afford a typical first home priced at £250,000. This is £27,000 more than the average UK salary of £33,000. And of course, if you work and hope to live in London, the situation is even worse. This affordability gap is currently at its highest point since the recession, and the result is that transitioning from renting to home ownership has become a major challenge for many, especially without significant financial support. So this begs two questions. Will this gap keep growing? And how will people ever be able to afford their first property? In this video, we'll explore these questions and discuss some potential solutions to address these issues. According to this recent report, which talks at length about the challenges first-time buyers are facing, since 2002, mortgaged home ownership in the UK has fallen by over 2 million and is back around the levels last seen in the late 1980s. While some of this drop is due to older generations paying off their mortgages, the main reason fewer people are buying their first homes is simple. It's become much harder to afford one. Of course, the barriers to buying a first home include not just the deposit and associated costs required to purchase it, but also the ongoing cost of ownership, which involves higher mortgage repayments. As you can see from this chart, the costs of buying a home have fluctuated over the years. In the past, some lucky generations found these costs relatively affordable, like in the early 1980s and mid-1990s. But today, first-time buyers face the worst of both worlds: high deposits and high mortgage repayments. It's no surprise that UK Finance reported a 22.4% drop in the number of mortgaged first-time buyers in 2023 compared to the previous year. Unless mortgage rates drop or house prices decrease, first-time buyers will have to overcome significant hurdles to achieve their dreams of home ownership. Many of the solutions that worked when mortgage rates were low just aren't effective anymore. Some people might argue that we've seen high interest rates before, like in the 80s and 90s. And that's true. But it's not just about interest rates. There are other factors to consider. For example, today's buyers mostly use capital repayment mortgages, where you pay off both the interest and the loan itself. In the past, interest-only and endowment mortgages were more common, which were often cheaper monthly but riskier long-term. Also, more young people today have student loan debt, which wasn't as big of a factor in previous generations. In addition, even though interest rates were much higher in the past, the amount of debt that people had relative to their income was significantly lower. Now it's easy to fall into the trap of focusing on the parts of the UK where the challenges facing prospective first-time buyers are more extreme. Even using national data on first-time buyers can be misleading, as it's heavily influenced by London and the south of England. Therefore, it's also important to consider how the challenges facing prospective first-time buyers vary across the country, because it's fair to say that the scale of the problem is not the same across the nation. For example, in London, the average first-time buyer needs a deposit equal to 1.5 times their gross annual income. But in the Northeast, it's about 60% of your gross salary, which, don't get me wrong, is still a lot of money. People often say that if you're willing to move to a more affordable area and start with a small flat, for example, you can eventually move up the property ladder. However, this concept has been challenged in recent years due to rising property prices, increased deposit requirements, and economic pressures that have made it more difficult for many people to progress up the ladder. According to this paper, in the past, the conditions allowed first-time buyers to build equity quickly, thanks to rising property prices and falling mortgage rates. This was the foundation of the so-called housing ladder. Buy a small property, watch it appreciate, and then move up. But that might not be a viable strategy anymore. With higher mortgage repayments and economic challenges, many first-time buyers might find themselves stuck in their first homes for much longer than they planned. Unless they see a significant increase in income, receive an inheritance, or get financial help, moving up the ladder could be out of reach. So that's the issue right now, and I'm sure this isn't news to many of you. But what are some possible solutions to this crisis? One idea put forward by the authors of this paper is for the government to simply build more homes. I think that a major factor as to why rents and house prices in general have been going up is simply because of an increased demand but a limited supply of housing. It's just basic economics. The problem is that government funds are of course limited, and the significant increase in house building could present political challenges. However, a gradual approach to building new homes could help align house prices with wage growth without causing sudden disruptions. Another suggestion is ensuring that while house prices may continue to rise, they don't outpace earnings. This would involve building new homes at a sustainable rate and implementing policies that encourage better use of the existing housing stock. This seems like a reasonable approach to balancing the housing market, as increasing supply can help ease pressure on prices. Additionally, encouraging more efficient use of existing housing stock can help address shortages without requiring excessive new construction. However, finding this balance is tough, because it's important to put the policies into action properly and make sure that they work well together, without causing problems like reducing market demand or discouraging investment. But if done carefully, it could help stabilize the market and potentially make home ownership more accessible over time. Another suggestion to make homes more affordable relative to incomes is that the government should commission an independent review that can propose policy changes. Suggestions in this report include long-term fixed-rate mortgages and even using pensions for a deposit. Of course, this is not a conventional approach, as fixed rates for 30 years is unheard of in the UK and could result in higher overall costs. Regarding the use of pensions for home purchases, this sounds interesting, but there are so many implications to this. One of them being that it could simply deplete retirement savings and create a whole new set of financial problems. The report offers many more recommendations within a 40-page document. But the key takeaway is that the UK housing market is undoubtedly in a crisis. And while the data and proposed solutions aren't entirely new, they emphasize the pressing need for a change. Now, there is another aspect to this discussion. While it's clear that owning a home today is extremely challenging, we need to address why so many people feel the need to buy a house in the first place. Despite the economic conditions making home ownership difficult, society still pushes the idea that owning a home is essential for a successful life. This creates unnecessary stress and a sense of failure for those who cannot achieve it. The reality is that judging a successful life by whether or not someone owns a home is kind of outdated, and most people who own homes are heavily in debt due to mortgages, leaving them at the mercy of lenders. Recently, it was revealed that 40% of people under 40 have given up on the idea of owning a home. Many see this as a disaster because owning a home is often seen as the only path to success. This mindset unfairly labels this 40% as failures who aren't contributed to the economy or succeeding as adults. There is a snobbish attitude that those who own homes are better than those who rent. But in countries like Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, where less than half the population owns homes, renting is totally normal, and no one looks down on renters. For Generation Rent, who may take 10 years to save for a deposit, life in their 20s and 30s is expected to be miserable just to meet the expectation of owning a home. Even then, some won't be able to buy until they're in their 40s. So the challenges facing first-time buyers today are significant and complex. While there are potential solutions, they will require careful planning and consideration to be effective. But it's important to remember that home ownership is not the only path to a successful life, and that it's okay to focus on living fully, even if buying a home isn't in the cards right now. In the meantime, check out this video next to learn about 2 unexpected reasons why your retirement income may be affected. And watch until the end of that video to find out what you can do about them. See you there.